Hey, it's Andres here coming to you live from the Baking Steel Test Kitchen. And today we have a treat. We're making English muffins, one of my favorite things to make on the steel. Besides pizza, it's considered a bread. We call them English muffins. And I've made one from my dough this morning. You'd see, amazing, right? It's beautiful. We'll open this up at the end of class. It's still cooling down a little bit, but it looks even better than Thomas's, right? The famous Thomas's. And these things are legendary. And I say that because we did a lot of tests on these. And I know people have made them here before, maybe some first timers. I make these and my kids devour them. We've tried taste tests against Bay's, against Thomas's. Those are the main two. I think Dave's got one too. Those are the main, and we win the homemade version every single time. They're incredible. We just do a quick 24-hour ferment. So today in Grand Rapids, live, let's make them. I'm gonna make the dough first. Then we're gonna go, I've got my baking steel griddle preheating on my oven, and we're gonna fry, not dry, these English muffins, show you how the cooking process. It's super simple, but yet so amazing. They're delicious. English muffins, here we go. We're going to start with the dough, and there'll be pauses throughout this class if this is your first time, and I'm going to get to every question I can. I shouldn't, we'll get to every question. And if I forget your question, just drop it in again, and I'll be sure to get it to you, okay? So we're going to go with a top down. See what I'm doing here? I've got my baking steel dough container here. These are awesome. I am using all-purpose flour today. This is a center milling all-purpose flour. It is organic, which I love, organic. This is all-purpose, lower protein content than our bread flour. Got 10.5. So that just means it's going to be a little bit softer than our bread dough or pizza dough. A little softer, a little bit easier to bite into, which makes these English muffins literally insane. So I've got my flour and my sugar in here already. I'm going to add 16 grams of, about 20 grams of sea salt. This is 550 grams of flour. So once I put my salt in, I just whisk it around. This is very similar to our pizza dough and anything else that we make. Very simple to mix, right? And now for my yeast, I'm using an active dry yeast from Fleshman's. I'm using about 2 grams of this. I dump that in and I whisk this around. And the idea is just to make sure my yeast and my salt are separated a little bit. And that's really all I do. Now, next, I'm going to take my water. And this is filtered water. It's 360 grams. So these are basically about 70% hydrated. Very sticky dough, like our pizza dough. If you want more nooks and crannies, you can amp it up to like 75%. And now I'm going to do is just like I normally do. I'm going to let the water and the flour come in contact and hydrate. And I kind of just splash it around carefully, right? Once I feel like the water's taken to the flour, now I'm going to get my one hand in the bowl and just gonna press it, lightly press this all into one big mass. And I'm doing this with my hand and I'm pressing down so it forms one ball. I'm getting rid of those flour clumps, as you can see, all right? And typically we're gonna add a little bit of fat to this dough as well. And that could be in terms of, it could be butter, it could be avocado oil, it could be anything really, right? Any kind of fat, but we find clarified butter to be a really nice add to this recipe. And of course I don't have any melted, so what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna just substitute some olive oil in, which is quite all right. And I do this for about 2 or 3 minutes. You can see it's forming one big mass of dough, right? And I just scrape up my bowl along the way. Get everything in there. We really measured this out specifically, so I want to try to get all the ingredients. And now last, I'm going to take my olive oil, which is the fat in the recipe, and I just kind of sprinkle it in, right? And I'm going to work this oil into the dough as well, and I'll need this for another minute. And the oil just kind of lubes up those gluten strands a little bit. Makes them a little bit softer to the bite. Barely noticeable, but noticeable enough. So this is my dough, right? I'm gonna set this aside. Let's go here to the camera. You can hear that sink. Sorry about that. I will literally cover it up. This is my recipe. And I'll go through it again right here with you. And we're going to send an email out with this recipe, but this is 500 grams of organic all-purpose flour. I use central milling. It is 20 grams of sugar, like granular organic sugar, right? Cane sugar I used. And then we used 20 grams of sea salt, about 2 grams of active dry yeast. And again, I measured everything with my scale, my digital scale, because I want to really hit all these ingredients. We measured, this is how we made the recipe, so it was designed this way. That hydration level is super important. We got that. And I add a little bit of fat at the end. I used olive oil, but you could use avocado oil. You could use avocado oil. You could use clarified butter, which is what I'm using today on the griddle, etc. And ultimately, we're making English muffins, right? So I let this now sit for the next 24 hours. And then comes, and I don't have any ready. I do have some ready, but I want to make one for you too. Then comes the challenging part of after this sits for 24 hours, tomorrow it's going to double in size. In this bowl, it really won't rise as much. It'll spread, if that makes sense. So the next step is making our English muffin balls like here. Let me show you the difference here. Open my lid up here, right? And I've got this English muffin dough ball. I'm going to make a dough ball now so you guys can watch me do it. I'm going to do that by just taking I measure about 95 grams for this batch. I made about 95 gram dough balls. That's good, right? And I want to make this into a little ball. And I use like a little semolina flour. And I'm just going to take my hand and kind of use the cupping method. I'm just going to press and turn it like this. I'm cupping it, right? Like cupping it like this and just kind of pressing down and turning. And this takes a little practice, just creating a little tension in that ball. You can see I made it like a ball, right? And I could even fold it again like a pizza dough if I wanted to, right? Pinch it at the end. And I'm going to let this now sit back in my container. I'll sprinkle some semolina flour on top, and I'll have my dough balls, and I'll show you what that looks like. Because I did this morning. You can see I've got about 3, 6, 8, 9. This made about 10, my recipe. These each about 95 grams. So now I made those dough balls this morning at 9 a.m. So they rested for 3 hours at room temperature. So this dough sat at room temperature in the bulk state. I divided it up this morning and I made my dough balls, and I'm letting those balls rest covered again for another 3 to 4 hours, if you will. The idea is to let these things proof and rest and relax. And then when we bake them, they do a little rise again, you can see from the heat. And man, are they gorgeous, right? So let's get to some questions before we go onto the griddle to make these things. I'll start here with Paul. Yes, Mike, I'm sorry. Mike, we are using clarified butter or ghee, correct? Yes, exactly right. How many grams of sugar and salt? So Deborah, I use 20 grams of salt and 20 grams of organic cane sugar. How much oil? Again, about 20 grams of oil. And I kind of guessed it at the end. I was just kind of lubing it at the end, but it's about 20 grams. Have you ever made gluten-free options of these English muffin? Christy, great question. I have not, but there are some flours now that kind of let you do the same follow the same steps. And apparently the flours are incredible. I have not tried them with English muffins, but that's a great idea. So Mike's asking, sit 24 hours, room temperature or fridge? So Mike, I did room temp yesterday. I was baking and I knew I'd be making these things. I did room temperature the entire way. So I thought I wanted these to rise a little bit. I made the dough yesterday afternoon, knowing I'd have class today. And I thought I'll just do a room temperature rise. So that way I found that when I did my final proof this morning, 3 hours was going to be adequate. If that dough is cold, and by the way, cold dough is easier to make those dough balls. It's easier if the dough is cold because English muffins are very wet and sticky. So I probably should have emphasized that. I put a lot of semolina flour down, so my hand, you can see my hand didn't really stick to it. I was very careful, but I know intuitively to use a lot of flour. So if it's gonna be sticky, because if you want good English muffins, you need to have a lot of water in there to create those air pockets. It just makes it more challenging to work. There's other ways of doing it too if it's sticky. In fact, I'm gonna show you another way. Because Mike, this is a really good question. This is a really important step too. So let me just cut another piece off here. I'm gonna show you what I mean by that. Let's go to, let's say tomorrow you're making your balls, your English muffins, and here's your dough. It's really sticky. And you want to really do a good job of putting some semolina flour down. Oops, I got frozen here. 1 second here, guys, sorry. There we go. All right, so you do a really good job. So this dough is very sticky. So I'm going to take my hand and make sure I've got a good ample amount of semolina flour on it, right? And then I'm just going to lightly press down and press and kind of turn. And just keep going until you kind of get a feel for it. Alternatively, if I don't want to, I could also just take this dough and just keep folding it into the center of itself, like this. This might be a little bit easier. I'm accomplishing the same thing. I'm just creating some tension, getting some of the air out of it, and creating a ball. And I can press this enough, and then I can kind of pick it up in my hands. You can see it's kind of smoothed out now. And now I can, like a pizza ball, I can kind of just keep folding, trying not to break those gluten strands. And then just, at the end, just kind of pinch it, right? And there's our English muffin, okay? And then when I do put it back in my container, I just want to sprinkle, I might put a little semolina below it and a little bit on top. That's how Thomas's does it, I think. So that makes sense. Of at least 24 hours, which gives us that really nice texture and flavor. And a short amount of time too, to be honest. 24 hours is great. And again, we always like to ferment our doughs because we're breaking those glutens down, making them easier on our body to digest, which is a healthier version of breads and doughs. Always ferment. I could make these English muffins same day. And again, they're not going to be, they might be a little tasty, not as tasty, but they're not going to digest as well. The gluten is meant to be fermented, I believe, for at least 24 hours. And that's how you'll get that really nice flavor and good texture. I hope that answers that, Mike. Vicky, how many balls did you make? So with that recipe, 550, 360, 20, 20, 20, made about 10 English muffins at about 100 grams each. Again, all you really do when you're making that recipe is add up 550, 360, 20, 22, and add all those up. I should know this off the top of my head. Can someone do that math? 550, 300, 850, 910, 939, 950, plus a little bit of salt. So it's almost 1,000 grams total. And I made 10 English muffins at about 100 grams each. So you can see that math works out great. If I want to make 20 English muffins, I would just double that size, double the volume of my flour and water, and I would have 20 because I have 2,000 grams of dough. Make sense? Kate, yes, it was 550 grams of flour. Andres, what size capacity is your mixing bowl container? Great question. I should know this. I think it's on my website. Let me see here. Exactly. It's out of stock. You know, the good news is they just came in stock again, which is great. 4 inches high. It holds 1,500 grams of flour. So it handles, I don't know if that doesn't answer the size question, but it handles a lot of, so it handles 3 times the amount I just made. Maybe, I'm not even sure the total capacity of it, but I think that's about our max. So about 1,500 grams of flour and about 1,000 grams of water. So 2,500 grams total is what we usually recommend in there, because that will max out when it starts to proof and ferment, it'll max out and rise. But it makes good. It makes, 4 pizza doughs, 8 pizza doughs. You need 2 of them to hold the balls. Do baked English muffins freeze well? Vicky, yes, great question. All bread freezes amazing. I would obviously let it cool first, but this could go right in the freezer just like this. It's not quite cool yet, but once it's ready, yes. Highly recommend freezing breads. Now you can wrap them individually or however you're going to make, how many you're making in a session, and you have those available. They'll thaw out very quick like breads, very super fast. Anybody else have a question? All right. All right, you guys ready to go in on the oven? I'm going to change up here and give you guys a different view. So bear with me. I'm going to show you exactly what I'm looking at with my, like my necklace. It's great, isn't it? I'm going to show you exactly what I'm looking at here. What I'm going to make. You see this? So let's go over to, in fact, I'm going to move my computer so I can see, make sure I'm not giving you guys a bad view. Right? You can see my, let me go back like this. There's my griddle. I've got my griddle preheating at about, let's see. Can you see that? It says 348, 350. So to me, I blasted this. This is an electric stovetop. This is the baking steel mini griddle. I blasted this stovetop. I got to about 400 degrees and then I dropped, you can see here, I dropped this down to like low. Because the steel holds its heat so well, once I got it to the desired temperature, now I just lowered it, brought it back, and it's giving me that ideal temperature. And I'm using clarified butter today. So I try to keep that around 350, which is where it is, essentially, right in the center. So let me grab a knife and get to work here. So I'm going to show you, take a little bit of clarified butter. Again, drop it in the center here, right? You can see that melting nicely. I like clarified butter because it's going to burn a little bit hotter. It won't burn as fast. There's not any, the milk solids have been removed, so we can cook with it a little bit nicer. So now we've got my English muffin here, and I take, this is the semolina side that was facing up, and I place that down, just like this. And now I'm going to turn my timer on for about 5 minutes. You can see it's sizzling. Isn't that nice? And I got my timer on for 5 minutes. And we'll get back to that when the timer goes off. And let's get to some more questions, you guys. Let's see. Paula, can you add in fruit like blueberries? And when would you add them? Oh, that's a nice idea. Blueberries. In fact, I just ate a bunch of wild blueberries. One of my favorites. I just found this out, by the way. I like to eat fresh berries every day. And I went to, sometimes fresh berries don't taste great, right? So I went to Whole Foods and grabbed some wild frozen blueberries. This bag is like, gosh, it's 32 ounces, which is a lot. It's a lot of blueberries. And I can just pour them in and they're actually beautifully cooked. I mean, fresh frozen blueberries. I love them. Sometimes you buy blueberries, they don't taste as good. Other days they taste great. So depending on the batch, frozen ones, wild berries, always awesome. If I was going to add these into my dough, I would add them, after probably right when I add in, probably right before the oil, I would put them into my into my dough and just kind of knead them in there. It'd be messy, but blueberry, yeah, that'd be awesome. Good idea. Chocolate chips. Any flavor I would be doing as I'm kneading it in, basically. Great question. Amount of blueberries, Paula, that I would just literally guess. If this was a cup, I'd probably use half this cup. That would be my inclination. I mean, if I'm doing recipe testing, I would typically put a half cup in and measure it, take a note. That's how many blueberries I made, make the batch, and kind of test it and see, do I want more or less? There's no right or wrong answer there, depending on how many you like to use. Good adventure, though. I like that. Michael, please repeat the numbers of ingredients. Yes, Michael, good question. I'm also gonna give this to you guys in an email form too. So just so you know. But for now, this is gonna be 550 grams of organic all-purpose flour. It's going to be 360 grams of room temperature water, 2 grams of yeast, 20 grams, just think 20, 20, 20 here, 20 grams of sea salt, 20 grams of organic cane sugar, and 20 grams of oil. We try to keep it easy. Awesome. Yeah, can eyeball it. That's with the blueberries. Yeah, good. Let's see how we're doing here for time. Okay, it's been about 2 minutes. We're not there yet. I like to do, so let's get back to the cooking technique of the English muffin. Really important here. We tested this and we did a lot of different tests. And we have the mantra now for our English muffins, because we went in the oven in the early stages for our English muffins. We now have the mantra, fry, not dry. And what that means is we're essentially frying these English muffins on the stovetop. And we do this for about 5 minutes on each side, 5 or 6 minutes on each side. And what we're doing is we're literally like lightly frying the bread on top of on the stovetop. And that really helps the nooks and crannies. They don't become dried out, because when we were going in the oven, we found it was just sucking out all the water content, removing it. So that's when we settled on, Chef Craig and I, we did the fry, not dry method. And that just means fry them. And avocado oil, clarified butter, olive oil might smoke a little bit too much, so we kind of avoided. I think we've made them with that before, but didn't love it. Clarified butter, olive oil, and clarified butter, avocado oil are our 2 favorites for this. And you do want to use clarified butter because, again, the butter could technically burn if you're using regular butter, because we just remove, and you can buy ghee now. You can buy it at the store instead of clarifying it yourself, which makes it a little bit easier. I hope that helps. What about using wheat flour? Great question, Paula. Wheat flour. In fact, I'm gonna get to that in 1 second. Let's take a look. Let's go back to this English muffin. I'm gonna flip it over so you guys can see what I'm doing again. You can see our English muffin, right? There's my timer. That's been about 5 minutes. Now we look underneath. Oh, look at that, right? That pretty? Beautiful, right? So I'm gonna take this. I could add, at this point, if I wanted to add a little bit more butter, I can drop a little bit more butter down. And by the way, I'm typically, like after class today, I'm gonna make, on the mini griddle, I can do 4 of these at a time. But today, just for class sake, you can see I've got a little bit of oil there, right? And my griddle, again, is pretty hot, not super hot, right? And now I just kind of, I lightly tap it just to flatten that other side out, but I don't want to squish it. So I'm just doing a light love tap, right? And now you can see I've got more surface area that's cooking. And that's a nice size English muffin. And you can see how it's lightly frying in the oil or the clarified butter, right? And again, 5 or 6 minutes is all it takes on each side. I've got one here too, so you can see the color, because we know cooking is at a really good temperature, and that's the clarified butter, boom, on each side. Looks just like the ones in the store, right? Awesome. So Paul is asking about, great question here, how about whole wheat flour? And just like our pizza dough, I highly recommend trying different flours, combining different flours together. Just need to be careful. There's a lot of unknowns. When we switch, these recipes were developed using straight organic bread flour, straight organic all-purpose flour. So we're really mindful when we design the recipe to use that specific flour and call out that specific flour. I gotta put my timer on, sorry. So if we design the recipe that way, now if you want to substitute in, this is where you need to be careful. Wheat flour, as we have found with, through trials, is that it absorbs the water differently than, say, bread flour would, or organic flour, all-purpose flour would. So be really mindful. So what I would do in this case, if I want to make whole wheat English muffins, this recipe calls for 550 grams of all-purpose flour. I might start with 10% of wheat flour in there. So in other words, I'll use that would be 55 grams of wheat flour and 495 grams of all-purpose flour. So I would just lightly try 10% first. Again, I would write that down, and then I would make them, I would taste them and say, these are really good. I might like a little bit more wheat, a little bit more nutty flavor. So what I would do then is the next batch, I might add 15% in. And, we found with wheat, any more than 20 really tends to dry it up. And we didn't test different water levels. So with this amount of water, we find 20% of that. So you might use 110 grams, call it 100 grams of wheat flour to 450 grams of all-purpose flour. That might be your combination, Paula. That might be like, oh, I love this right here. And now it's your recipe, right? You developed that, you designed it. It's your own legendary English muffins. If that makes sense. Michael, yes, great question. In fact, I should have done that today. I was kind of showing off the griddle. I keep the griddle on my stovetop all the time. I've got my baking steels inside the oven. Yes, you could clearly, but as you could see, I use clarified butter. Just got to be mindful that butter does not kind of fall off the sides, right? Common sense, but just be mindful, keeping everything in the center. But you could easily, in fact, I know a lot of people that do make their English muffins on their baking steel original on the stovetop, whether it be a gas, electric, induction, you name it, right on top. Works great, super versatile. That's why we love it. So good question. All right, anybody else have a question here? We're almost done. We're almost done. You can see this one here too. That's great. Amazing. That kid's gonna be happy later. Can they be baked in the oven? Yes, Brian, they can be. However, again, our recipe was developed with the fry, not dry method. So you just got to be mindful of how long you're going to bake them for. You're still going to want to fry them to get the color and the crust, right? You still want to do that. You want to fry them for a couple of minutes, then throw them in the oven? Yes, you could. I just don't know what the time frame would look like, how long that might be inside the oven. So I would recommend not keeping them on the stovetop and the fry not dry. There probably are other English muffin recipes out there that people bake them. So I would give those a try, but our favorite is this. These are legendary, guys. I'm not joking. These are amazing. How does your gas grill work on the gas stovetop? Thomas, it was designed to work on a gas stovetop. That's what we had in our old test kitchen. Phenomenal. It works incredibly well. Gas, just because it heats up so fast. You can crank up to high heat, get this thing to that right temperature really fast with gas. I can really dial it in a lot better than I can on the electric. But with that said, actually, I can't put gas in this building here. So I really am very pleased with the way that electric works. But again, it was designed for gas, which is ideal. So Deborah, I have one and it's great. I love it. Thank you. Can you increase the water when increasing the amount of with wheat? Yeah, good idea. Yeah, I would, Claudia, highly recommend that. If you're really dead set on using the wheat flour, we have 360 grams of water. If you want to go beyond the 20% of wheat flour in there, yeah, I would crank up. Again, take notes, document what you're making, And that way, you can feel and see if you like them or not. And then you can, go back to your notes after you made them and say, maybe these need a little bit more water, right? And we do that all the time. We're always documenting our recipes and then going back and saying, oh man, this is great. Let's add more water and we'll dial this in. You can almost create recipes just on your notes, if you will. I always like gas. It's a wonderful flavor. Raisin with a pinch. Janet, good idea. Raisins with a pinch of cinnamon. Beautiful idea. Yes. So I'm going to turn the timer off. Grab this English muffin. You guys can see. And this is a good size too. You can see our English muffin is gorgeous, right? Probably a little cooler than my last batch, but I mean, awesome, right? So here's mine. Let's I got you here. Let me go this way here. So the way I open my English muffins up, I'm gonna take this necklace off. The way I open these up, I like a serrated knife, right? And let me just clean that off so you can see. This is a great little Italian knife. It's called Sinelli. These are awesome. They're like $40, but these plastic handles. Chef Craig introduced me these two. I use it all the time. I just kind of lightly go around the perimeter. Some people say fork. I don't know if the fork works as well. And then I just kind of peel it open. Carefully. Center. Nooks and crannies. Isn't that awesome? Right? Boom. They look amazing. So good. So good. And we'll be making these a little bit later today. I'll be, putting some butter on them, making some sandwiches. Kids are going to love them. Good. So good. And we'll be making these a little bit later today. I'll be, putting some butter on them, making some sandwiches. Kids are going to love them. They're awesome. Super good. Super easy to make. Again, 5 or 6 minutes, fry, not dry. That's my mantra for these things. Mix that dough 24 hours. You make, 10 of these things. This is about, again, 95 to 100 grams. So not a lot. And they're great. They're awesome, Kelly. Yes. Thanks, Cannon. Thank you. Is this recipe in the book, Kate? I believe it is. I think it's in the book. And we're going to send an email out too with this email. I think it might come either Friday or Monday. Anybody that's here today, we will get that to you. Could you use sourdough starter? And Kelly, great question. So if I'm going to do sourdough starter, I'm going to take, I'm going to remove 50 grams of water and 50 grams of flour and add 100 grams of my sourdough starter in. That'll balance that out. It's about 20%. And it's going to be ridiculous. It's awesome. I've done these. They're awesome. Just substitute that in. And now you don't need the yeast, right? And you just got your sourdough starter in there and it's great. I think we have a sourdough version on our site too. I like adding a bit of spelt flour. Ooh, that's nice. Larry, great. I love how you think. I find that it does a great job enhancing the flavor without affecting the gluten formation, which, yeah. So Larry is talking about spelt, and I totally agree with you, Larry. I will sometimes, if I have guests and I'm making a special night of pizza, I will add in 5% spelt flour into my recipe just for that, like hidden, hey, what is that flavor in there? The spelt does a really amazing job. In fact, we should do some spelt English muffins. That's a really great idea. And what I would do, instead of 550 organic all-purpose flour, I would do 500. And then maybe I'd add 50 grams of spelt in there. Which is about 10%, so maybe even 25 grams. Just that little bit is gonna make a big difference in that flavor. And it's a really nice idea, Larry. What book that includes this recipe was referenced? Oh, Michael, we have a book called Baking with Steel. It's on Amazon. I think we have some back in stock very soon at our site, but Baking with Steel, a book we did a few years ago where we kind of lay out some of our favorite recipes on the steel. And the English muffins, I think it was still legendary back then too. So they're great and they're in there. I hope that helps. And you guys use me as a reference too, please. I'll put my email down here, andrus@bakingsteel.com. And I'm going to give away a mini griddle today too, because I like giving away stuff at class. These are awesome. That's my email. Any questions ever? I I will do my best to get back. If I don't, just don't be afraid to send it again, but I will. My email box is jamming. I love it. I will get back to your questions. I love it and be very helpful for you if I can. Hope that helps. And I'm going to randomly pick, if somebody's still here, I'm going to randomly pick them. Okay. Here we go. It's going to be Dee Dee Colwell. Are you still here, Dee Dee? If you're still here, please send me a message in the box. And that is the only prerequisite. You got to still be here. But you won. That's awesome. You won a baking steel mini griddle. It's coming. Send me an email, andres@bakingsteel.com, and I'm gonna I'll get your address and all that. You're gonna love it. The mini grill rocks. Awesome. So yeah, Dee Dee, make sure you're andres@bakingsteel.com. And anybody have any more questions for me? Awesome. I love it. They're great, Michael. Yes. Congrats, Dee Dee. They're amazing. Anybody else have any questions? They're great. The mini griddle is one of my favorites. It's small. It fits. I can do 4 of these at a time, which I'll be doing after class today. They're amazing. You're gonna love them. The mini is $169 currently. How long have I been a chef, Janet? You know what? I worked in restaurants under some great chefs a long time ago. I have not, and I've been working with the baking steel, so I've been a baking steel chef for since the baking steel was created. That's it. I'm not a real chef. I love to cook. I worked in great restaurants under some great leadership, really creative, and so I've got a really good background, really fun. Yeah, please, guys, if you make these English muffins, please report back. They're amazing. They're so good. Thank you, Janet. I appreciate you guys, your kind words. You guys are amazing. Thank you for being here. We will see you again. Next week, we're doing a pizza hangout. So come back. If you made English muffins, tell me. Next week's pizza, it's going to be amazing. Can't wait. Thank you, guys. Stay great.